Hi, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio, where we're mantra to educate, enlighten, and entertain. And I want to do a disclaimer. The views of the guest in this interview may not represent those of the station or the host. Always seek your primary care physicians and medical advice. I have with me today very special guests. All my guests are special, and I learned from each one. My guest today is no exception. I have Dr. Sterlin Mosley with us today, with us. And he wrote the book, The Narcissist in You and Everyone Else, Recognizing the 27 Types of Narcissism. Dr. Sterlin Mosley is a professor of human relations at the University of Oklahoma, where he teaches classes on personality, psychology, social change, cultural awareness, and media. Dr. Mosley is a certified Enneagram coach and teacher. He is a scholar in the fields of empathy, narcissism, and personality psychology. He has developed and facilitated numerous undergraduate and graduate courses, professional workshops and training, and lectures on the topics of personality, empathy, culture, gender, and communication. I hope I got all of that, Dr. Mosley. I can't read my handwriting sometimes.
You did a great job. That was perfect.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Mosley, to Chatting with Betsy. I'm so happy to have you on. And, wow, when I saw your book and read about your book, I was like, am I a narcissist? There's so many different types that you have. And I know that you interviewed like 4,000 people, and it took you, I think, 2 years to do your book. I have to ask you, how did you get that many people to come to you about your research?
Very good question. Yeah, so one of the perks of being I guess if you are a researcher working at a university is you can design a study and send it out to a lot of people. I have a big network, and so I developed the initial research that was sort of the pilot for the book, and send it to former students, and of course, my Facebook, and I have a large social media following for my Enneagram business. And so luckily I was able, and of course they sent it to people, and so it just grew and grew. And it was in 2020, so it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I think people were sitting at home with nothing to do. So I managed to get a lot of survey questionnaires back that then I used for the second phase of my research, which was the interview portion, which people, when you read the book, and when you read the book, you sort of saw snippets of the different interviews. I didn't do 4,000 interviews. That would have been crazy, but but I did close to 200.
Wow.
To get a good sample size, and so that's the basis of the research for the book, and then it just gave me a great sample size to pull from to sort of fetter out these different narcissistic types.
And I also was going to ask, and I do want to ask you, is what motivated you to write about all these different subtypes of narcissist behaviors? Because sometimes I think, is there a little bit of narcissist in everyone? And yes. So that's what I wanted to.
Yeah. No, I am absolutely. That is, the motivation is personal. I think everyone has known, whether or not they know it or not, and that's one of the things I hope people can get from the book, is everyone has known a narcissist, probably closer to them than they realize, if they aren't themselves a narcissist. But everyone has interacted with a narcissist to some degree, and of course, narcissism exists along a continuum. But I'm no exception. I have family members, and I've had mentors and colleagues and some people very close in my life that were in my life for a long time, and I just could not figure out why they were so crazy-making for me and for a lot of other people. And then, of course, there are aspects of everyone, because everyone is there's two sides to every coin, where they were lovely people and they did a lot of good in my life or could have been helpful. And then there were, more often than not, there were just these ways in which it seemed like they interacted with me and most other people sort of like objects. And that's one of the kind of hallmarks of narcissistic tendencies in a personality structure, is that people aren't really people to many narcissists. They are a means to an end. And so I think most people have had an experience with somebody who played that role in their lives, and I am no exception. There's at least a few in my family, my extended family, and then there's and professional and mentor relationships. It's come up, and so that was the motivation, was to understand my experience first, and that's usually what propels me into my research. Is I want to know, I want to know what's happened and what's going on and why, and then hopefully I can provide insight to other people through my exploration.
Yes, this will definitely open up, your book definitely will open up people's eyes. When I was younger, we didn't really talk about psychology, and feelings. So I didn't really know what a narcissist was. And then I thought, oh, well, that's someone who really loves himself or herself and just thinks of themselves only. But that's not true all the time. Right. They may not even like themselves. And I didn't even know that. And I was just like I told you before I started to record, it took me 20 years to realize that my husband was a narcissist. He only wanted to do what he wanted to do. Things right. He was interested in. He didn't, I wanted to go to a concert. Oh, I'm not interested in that. Or, no, I don't want to do that because I did that before. But what about me? I didn't do that.
Right.
And
right.
It really, I have to say this. I understand now why people get divorced after 20-something years marriage. I didn't get divorced, but I can understand it, because you wake up one day and you're like, I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
Like,
right. Yeah.
Like, were you always like this? Did I just wake up to the fact that you are a narcissist? Forgive me, man, I'm talking about you right now. He might haunt me.
But no. Go
ahead.
Yes.
Do you find that?
I was just going to affirm to you that experience that you're talking about, that for a lot of people, just waking up one day and realizing that's what was going on here. And I know that was the case for me with a couple of people in my life, where I was just like, oh, that's what it is. And everything kind of makes sense. But yeah, no, I just wanted to affirm that, because I think, I think I'd like to believe that narcissism disappears in the afterlife. So hopefully, your husband is not holding a grudge at this point. So.
That is, I'd love to have fun when I interview. I'd love to have comedy. Can you please explain to the audience, because I never heard this myself until coming across your book, as to what a Enneagram coach is?
Yes.
What is the Enneagram?
Yes. What is the Enneagram? Great question. So the Enneagram is a personality typology. So a lot of people are familiar with the Myers-Briggs or the Big Five personality typology, and the Enneagram is a similar kind of personality system. And I've studied them all. It was part of my training. And I like the Enneagram. I discovered the Enneagram about 20 years ago, actually, when I was in high school. And I loved that it was a system of personality motivations rather than just behaviors or traits. Because one thing I intuitively understood, and when I delved into the Enneagram as a psychological field of study, that people people can behave a lot of different ways. Like if someone is dramatic, two different people are dramatic, well, we need to know why they're being dramatic or why they're being reactive, rather than that just being a trait that they have. So the Enneagram sort of posits 9 different basic personality types. And Enneagram actually is the word itself means 9-sided figure. The Enneagram is a geometric shape, 9 points. And there's a lot of kind of fuzzy history about the Enneagram. I kind of discussed a little bit of it in the book, but in some ways it is an ancient system, but the Enneagram as we use it now has been sort of modernized by some, in particular, a man named Claudio Naranjo, who was a Chilean psychiatrist, who kind of structured the Enneagram, which prior to that, with some of the older teachers like Oscar Ichazo and G.I. Gurdjieff and some sort of mystics from the past, used it more in a spiritual, esoteric way. And Naranjo took the system and said, okay, well, how can we apply these 9 points that we're pointing to sort of fixations of the ego and ways that human beings get stuck? How can we talk about this in a psychological, academic way that people can use for, in a clinical setting, which he was interested in? And so he kind of fleshed it out in that way. So basically, it's just a system of 9 personality types, and they all have a corresponding core fear and triggers and gifts and strengths and communication style, and even to some extent that they can have physical similarities, which is a very interesting aspect of the Enneagram. So I love it for that reason. It's so rich and deep, and I used it to frame this discussion of these 27 narcissistic subtypes. So it's 27 because there's 9 Enneagram types, and then there are 3 what we call instinctual types, which kind of relate to the primal way that human beings approach the world. And these are the social realm, the self-preservation realm, and then the intimate or sexual realm. And so 9 times 3 is 27. And so it ended up being 27 subtypes, because each of the 9 types has 3 different ways they approach the world, if that makes sense. It's a little complicated to listen to verbally.
Wow,
but
that's interesting.
I explain it in the book, and hopefully it will make more sense. But at its basic root, all anyone needs to know is that it's 9 personality types. So that's
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I had to ask this question because I'm curious.
Yes.
Do we as parents or guardians, whoever raises a child, do we, and sometimes, and not on purpose, do we cause someone to have a narcissistic personality by making them think they're the focus of our world, like the world revolves around them?
Right.
I just wondered that before the interview, because some kids now, I worked at a preschool, very entitled. I mean, they think they are.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I would say that the Enneagram, narcissism has a complex way in which it forms, and we can't really point to one thing or another. I will say I talk to people in my research and just in my everyday life who I would say qualify as narcissistic, who have the opposite kind of parenting style. Maybe their parents were neglectful or didn't pay much attention, or they were raised by, nannies or caregivers that weren't their parents and they didn't get a lot of attention. And then I know narcissistic people who were coddled and had everything given to them and, were praised and overpraised. And so there's a diverse experience of childhood, of parental styles with narcissists. And then at the same time, I know people who are not narcissistic, who had parents who were very congratulatory and said everything they did was great and didn't end up being narcissistic. So I do talk about in the book, the sort of different ways of looking at how narcissism forms and research. There's research in all these areas from parenting to environment to genetics to, a trauma-based model of trying to understand narcissism. And so it's not just one thing. But to your point, I have also noticed, I do think, and my next potential work might be on looking at narcissism as a cultural phenomenon, because what you're talking about with kids, there is an increase in narcissistic traits amongst the research I looked at was mostly looking at Gen Z, so ages 18 to 26, and an increase in, and some millennials, an increase in narcissistic traits. And a lot of people are looking at the role of technology and the way in which, how fast things move, and this sort of obsession with everybody wanting to be famous, and Instagram and TikTok and all of these things have sort of contributed to an increase in narcissistic traits in a generation. And so you're definitely seeing something at work there, because other people have noticed it too, and I think people are trying to figure out what's going on here. But those are just some of the hypotheses as to why it seems like narcissistic traits are increasing in the world.
That's you were reading my mind, because that's exactly what I'm going to ask you, was social media. I think social media was all, the TikTok and Instagram and whatever else is out there that I don't know about because I'm middle-aged. It's like, like, look at me, look at what I'm doing, and look how perfect I am, or, and then people are under the false impression, oh, well, so-and-so is living a good life, or they're great parents because they're, look at their family picture, but nobody knows, Dr. Mosley, what happened before or after that picture was taken.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, there is this sort of obsession with appearance, right? And that is a hallmark of narcissism, is a sort of increased superficiality, a need to be validated for external successes or appearance or money or status. And as a culture, particularly in the U.S., there's this obsession with, and now that, we have these platforms where anybody can be famous for literally doing nothing, just taking pictures of their breakfast or their pet or something. And and I mean, the pet videos are cute, but people are really getting, they're reaching a level of accessibility to fame that we've never had before as a culture, because social media has made it possible, and it definitely is affecting our brains. And so there is something called acquired narcissism, which is basically what we used to think of that only happened to like celebrities when they got famous. If someone wasn't necessarily as narcissistic or narcissistic before, and then they got famous and reached a level of fame and fortune that they didn't have before, and then they start to act like a narcissist. And the longer they're in that environment or situation, the more narcissistic, the more that narcissism sort of becomes part of the person's actual psychological structure. And that's kind of what's happening, I think, to, the young people on social media. Even my generation, I'm a millennial, but I think we started this whole social media thing, and it really is, it's a thing. So I want to validate you're seeing something that, their clinical researchers are trying to figure out, like, what is going on here and how do we stop it, because it could be a problem.
Yes, and I think it's causing, and I'm a big mental health advocate. I've done several mental health shows and issues about young people, and, the pandemic, of course, added to it, but the anxiety, the depression that these young people are facing, because they want to, everybody wants to fit in, but just the pressure of, if someone doesn't like your hair color, you get all bent out of shape about it. And it's very interesting to me. And folks, I'm not going to have Dr. Mosley give everything away in this interview. You have to get the book and read about these subtypes. I have to say that I worked with a narcissist, and this is a funny story, because I knew she was very insecure. I thought that narcissists were secure people, not all the time, I guess. very insecure, very jealous. One time I received an extra gift card from a parent who worked in a preschool, and this woman ran over to her friend and said, Betsy got an extra gift card from these parents, and started trouble. Mm-hmm. And why are you jealous about that? And then this is really funny, because this woman knew I was a caregiver for my husband, who had early onset Alzheimer's. And she had the nerve to say to me, I had to take care of my husband a whole weekend because he fell and he couldn't take care of himself. Betsy, you don't know what that's like. And I looked at her and I went, are you kidding me? Do you hear me when I talk? A weekend? That's all that you took? A weekend? I could do that standing on my head.
Right.
It's like they can't relate to other people's problems. Is that part of that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, she definitely, that sounds familiar. They can't, so they're competitive, of course, by nature. And that's not to say everybody that's competitive is narcissistic, but narcissists are always competitive because you're absolutely right, they do not have, they are insecure. Deep down, narcissists don't really, what we kind of teach about them is that they don't really have a sense of self. And in order to create a self, they sort of put on these, we all put on armor to some extent, but they put on these heavy layers of armor that cover over their insecurity. So the more grandiose and big and, prideful and boastful they are, the probably the less they actually feel adequate. But instead of being able to acknowledge that, as someone might be able to do that didn't have narcissism present, they turn it on the other person, and the other person is the problem, or they need to compete and take someone down, or subtly take someone down. It doesn't even have to be a big thing. And then, what you're describing with your coworker, she sounds like, the lack of empathy, right? To be able to say to you, I had to take care of my husband for a weekend when she knows you are a caregiver to somebody with a terminal illness is that sort of glibness they can have, and the lack of empathy where sometimes they just don't hear themselves. And they're surprised if you say to them, wow, that was insensitive, or are you kidding me? Because to them, they're always coming from the best place. And then that's when gaslighting gets in, and they start to convince you that what you're saying is wrong or what you did is wrong. And so it's an avalanche from there. But that experience is, I've heard similar stories and been in similar situations with narcissists where that kind of, you just have that jaw-dropping moment yourself where you're like, I cannot believe you just said that to me. And they don't even see a problem. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. And the same woman, Dr. Mosley, she would look in the mirror every time she passed by a window or a mirror. She had to stop and admire herself.
Yep.
Put her glasses on her head, take them off, fix her hair, fix her bangs. And I'm like, I said, I have never seen such a narcissist in my life. I mean, she was different than my husband was,
right?
Because there are so many different types. And being that I'm from New Jersey and in this tri-state area, I have to ask you this question.
Yes.
What type of narcissism is it, or how is the Don Mafia, the Mafia Don? How is that one portrayed?
Yeah,
I love the name of that one.
Then yes, the social ape, the Mafia Don. Yeah, so the sense of power, for that personality type, which is a type 8 in general, just without narcissism, is they want to amass power and influence over people because of a fear of being vulnerable or at the mercy of injustice. So the way that type 8 sort of walk in the world, even without narcissism, they want to make sure that they are never in a vulnerable position. They, like I said, they amass power, and they promise protection of others in service of loyalty. And and I mean in exchange for loyalty. And so the Mafia Dawn archetype that I wrote about is the narcissistic iteration of the social 8 personality type. And what happens is that, 8s without narcissism still have empathy, and they can be compassionate. Yeah, they can be blustery and angry and intimidating, but they also can soften and have a normal range of human empathy. But with the narcissism there, that subtype, they just want to control a group. They want to control a group of people. They will at first seem protective and formidable and strong, and they are. But because they lack empathy, they'll do whatever they need to do to get to a position of power. And in this sense, if you're really looking literally at the name that I use, the Mafia, I mean, that includes, killing people or doing whatever they need to do, right? And because they lack empathy, and in that range, we're in psychopathic territory, right? They don't have a sense of, you shouldn't do this, right? Because it's all about amassing power. And so then you protect people. Maybe you do things that seem kind or generous, as you offer your protection, but then they also want undying loyalty. And if you cross them or betray them in any way, they will come after you. They'll cut you off. It's a literal sense of the Mafia. They may put a hit on you or something. But I interviewed people that were this subtype that were in the corporate world, and it wasn't, I'm going to kill them, but it was like, you don't cross me, or I'll get you fired, or I'm going to get back at you in some way. And it's because they just believe that people should give their loyalty unquestioningly. And so they can be they're quite a formidable subtype. They can be one of the more dangerous ones if they get angry because of the rage that can come with that orientation.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you do see that a lot in a workplace. With loyalty, and also if a person has a different idea, and maybe you want to go against the grain or try something new, they're not praised for that. They're looked down on, and like, how dare you? I even seen it really in nursing. Well, actually, I don't want to sound like I'm biased because I am a female, but I see it a lot with women in the workplace. They don't want people to succeed, to be successful, because they're jealous and secure that person is going to be more successful than them. Instead of helping and working as a unit to have a better work environment. Right.
Yeah, and that's I'm glad you brought that up, because it kind of underlies one of the points of the book, which is this idea that everybody has a little bit of narcissism in them. I talk about good old Sigmund Freud, who we all are at least somewhat familiar with, and he talked about this concept of primary narcissism versus secondary narcissism. And primary narcissism, according to Freud, was sort of this idea that, like, in order to be a human being and exist in the world and have a healthy ego, you have to have some degree of primary narcissism, meaning you have to occasionally be able to, like, go for yourself and your needs, and not necessarily think about what other people want or need from time to time in order to get things that you need and want. And so this he considered to be a kind of a healthy form of narcissism. And the difference is that most people, when they're doing that, can step outside of it. And if someone says, hey, that hurt my feelings, or you did something to transgress someone, you can step back into your empathy and say, oh, hey, yeah, that wasn't cool, or I'm sorry, or consider, how your actions may affect someone else. But people with secondary narcissism, Freud said this is what develops when that sort of toddler state of, I want what I want it now, give it to me, doesn't go away at an age-appropriate time. And then this is kind of when we start to see the narcissistic traits become habitual, because narcissists who are actually narcissistic cannot step outside of that. And so in that situation you were talking about, where it's like you become competitive in the workplace, especially you were talking about with women, I think there's some cultural things happening there, right? Because we've set up this system where women are not valued as much in the workplace, and I think it sets up this really intense competitive environment where, and I did a lot of gender studies work and taught gender studies class, where a lot of women feel like they have to be cutthroat and like that in order to make it in sort of a masculine-dominated professional environment. So we could maybe consider that like a professional acquired narcissism, where people maybe that aren't narcissists are acting in ways that, clinically we might be like, wow, that's really narcissistic, and they may not be, or they may be, who knows? But yeah, I can definitely validate what you're seeing happens for sure.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I could see it like a women working in more of a male-dominated company or in a field. But when women are working with mostly women, you see it. But I think that's interesting, and I have to ask you this. I could talk to you for hours. Since I'm a caregiver, and I saw the entitled caregiver as one of the narcissist subtypes. What is that?
The entitled caregiver. Yes. So this is different than somebody who really is just either their job is a caregiver, or they become a caregiver by necessity because someone in their lives needs it, which anybody who isn't this personality type could fall into that. But in the book, this subtype, the entitled caregiver, is the narcissistic variation of what we call type 2, which is the helper. And the personality type overall is focused on, they get their identity from being someone who takes care of other people. And they need recognition from others that they are supportive, usually emotionally supportive, but often supportive in other ways, helpful to those they believe need their help. The helper name is a little bit misleading, because twos don't necessarily just want to help everybody. They choose who they believe need their help and who they want to help. But their identity comes from being someone who helps others, and their value comes from that. And that's just all twos, and narcissistic or not. But when we add the narcissism to the mix, we get someone who maybe doesn't actually really do that much for other people, but still thinks that they should get the recognition for doing things for other people. And so the entitled caregiver, this is actually one of the most prevalent types that I came across in my research. I think it's because they wanted, part of the type structure is a sense of pride about what they do for other people, and they like to talk about what they do and how helpful and supportive they are. And so they reached out to me a lot because the research was sort of veiled as I'm researching empathy, right? I didn't tell people I was researching narcissism because they wouldn't want to talk to me. So that was the idea, and so they would reach out to me and want to talk about all these great deeds that they did and all the things they've done for other people that people didn't appreciate, and why don't people see what I do for them? And the whole interview session would be them sharing story after story about all these things that they did for other people, and then therefore they deserve to be cared for. But there's a disparity in what they did and what they want. And so, one of my participants was a very wealthy person, and they said, well, I run the household, meaning they hire the maids and the people that do the shopping, and they manage the household, which I'm not saying that that's not a job, but then they therefore felt like they deserved to, I heard at least 2 or 3 stories about, firing this maid or that maid because they made one mistake, or and so there's this really kind of nasty side to that particular subtype that they feel justified in doing because they do so much. And so the normal kind of identity that personality type 2, gets from caring for other people is, in the narcissist, is inflated into this really grandiose kind of, I deserve only the best because, sometimes it was just because I put up with XYZ, because I live with my husband. So therefore I should get anything I want, and so it's not just that they're caregivers, it's that they may not really be doing all that much. But in their estimation, they deserve the world just by existing, just by being. And then they can be quite dismissive or cruel even, and often shift their attention from person to person. So if they're focused on someone, they may really do a lot. And shower them with gifts. But then if you do anything that makes them mad or they don't like, they're done with you, and they're going to shift to someone else and give that person their attention and make sure you see that you're not getting their attention anymore, if that makes sense.
Wow. Oh, that does. You just described the boss I had. To a T, Dr. Mosley. Yeah, I mean, this woman, she liked you, fine. She didn't, Lord help you, okay? Right. I mean, and right. If you, she did something for you, she let everyone know about it, and you had to be in, debt to her for like the rest of your life. It seemed like, I did this for you, right. I did that for you.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. And wow, and a part of that person was very nice. And could be very understanding. Yep. And then she had her flip side where it was like Jekyll and Hyde. You didn't know which one was going to come out.
Right.
Yep. Wow, that's so interesting. I didn't even cover more questions that I even had, but your time is up. You are wonderful, Dr. Mosley.
Thank
you.
And
thank you so much for talking to me. I'd love to talk to you again. You are just a phenomenal resource, and I want to encourage the audience, folks, you have got to get this book. It is, by the time this airs, it's going to be past holiday time, but hey, never too late to give out a book as a gift. Oh, here, happy birthday, read this. Valentine's, Mother's Day, whatever. This book is really very interesting. And I think if anyone is, in the psychology field, teaching field, education field, I mean, this book is an asset. I think this book would help. Nursing, it doesn't even matter what job you have. This book would be very, very helpful. It's eye-opening. Where can people purchase your book, Dr. Mosley?
So they can purchase it anywhere that books are sold online. Amazon, there's some independent online booksellers. I think it's booksellers.org. Of course, the publisher website, which is Rowman and Littlefield, and Barnes & Noble has it online. And if you want it in your local bookstore, request it, and they may purchase a few copies, and you can buy them for people and hand them out to your family, like you said. Not telling them that you're giving it to them because they're a narcissist, because that might not go over very well. But
Right. Yeah, don't tell them that they're narcissists. Just say, hey, I think this would be a great book for you to read. And did you have a website you would like to share with the audience?
Yes. So my sort of author website and book-focused website is just sterlinmosley.com. And then my Enneagram consulting business is empathyarchitects.com. And we also have a pretty big Instagram page for anyone who's on Instagram. It's in Empathy Architects on Instagram as well. So you can find, we teach courses on the Enneagram system and then also on narcissism and some aspects related to the book. We're starting to put out some content related to that. So yeah, people can find me there.
Well, I have to ask you this. Are people like that are they kind of afraid to talk to you? Because do you ever think, they might be thinking, he's analyzing me. He might think I'm a narcissist. I'll be in his book.
Yes, I have gotten some feedback that people can be a little intimidated. Not as of late, yes, with the narcissism stuff, because I knew I was working on this project. Before that, it was just the Enneagram, and people were like, are you typing me right now? Are you trying to figure out what type I am? I'm like, yes, I am always doing that, but it's sort of an automatic thing for me. So usually people don't know that's what's going on. But and I can usually get people's personality types pretty quickly. But it can be a fun party trick, too, for me to guess people's inner world just from hearing them and watching them interact for a little while. But, yeah, I don't want to scare too many people off because,
Yeah, that's the thing. When I was in school and people were taking psychology, they would say, oh, Betsy, we read about you in this course. You're this or you're that. And I was just like, well, maybe I shouldn't be talking to you. So I was just wondering about that. But thank you so much, Dr. Sterlin Mosley, for writing your book, helping other people. And, folks, you have to get this book because you would be amazed. It's really an eye-opener, and I just think it's a helpful book for anyone. You know what? You could look at it as a self-improvement book, really.
Yeah.
And who doesn't need self-improvement? Well, maybe a narcissist might think they don't need self-improvement, but I just, it's informative, and, we should want to better ourselves and be better human beings. And I thank you for coming on, chatting with Betsy and sharing your book with us, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Folks, all the information about Dr. Sterlin Mosley will be in the blog that Jeannie White, who's the station manager, writes. Thank you, Jeannie. And Jeannie also produces the show. I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Passionate World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank you all for listening and sharing. And please share my show to help other people. That's what my show is about. And it is free to subscribe to Chatting with Betsy on Amazon Music, iHeart, Spreaker, Spotify. And when you share the show, you are helping me with my mission and vision to help other people, because that's what my show is about. And it's in honor of my husband, Matt. And he was the catalyst for this show. So I just want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, blessed New Year. If it can't be happy, hope it's a peaceful one. If you're struggling at this time, please consult with your primary care physician for mental health resources in your area. It's different in every area. And I also want to say, as I always do at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, so please be kind, shine your light bright, because if we all did that, it'd be a much brighter and happier, peaceful world. And you know what, folks? It's never too late to change. It's never too late to improve on yourself. I'm 65. I am still learning. I'm growing as a person. And there is such freedom in being your 100% authentic self. And this year's been one of great inner work for me. And it's because of the wonderful guests I've had on the show, so who have helped me. And I hope they have helped you, the audience, as well. Take care, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye now.